Hi, I'm Dominic Zijlstra, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to a bonus episode of A Productive Conversation. It's me, Mike Vardy, and Dominic Zijlstra joins me on the program today. We talk about learning. We talk about Traverse.link, which is an app that he's been working on for quite some time and has developed, shows a lot of promise. And I wanted to shine a bit of a spotlight on him, why he built it, and, the idea of learning and retention. And I mean, he's not just somebody who built an app. He's an ed tech entrepreneur and polyglot. He helps professionals learn faster and remember more using science-based learning methods. We get into that. And his obsession with learning better started back in 2017 when he'd spent a year studying Mandarin but still couldn't communicate with his Chinese parents-in-law. So he dove deep into the science of learning and developed a learning method that actually worked. And it didn't just work for him, it's worked for others as well. We dive into that. And again, we dive into the Traverse system. There's lots to get into. Let's just get into it. Here's my conversation with Dominic Zijlstra here on A Productive Conversation. Enjoy. Dominic, thanks so much for joining me today on the program. This is an interesting conversation because this is take two for us to a degree. And it's interesting because there's always new forms of technology that emerge that work really well, and then they seem to fill a problem that you're looking to solve. And then sometimes they don't fill a problem, or they at least create a new one. And it's just fascinating the way software works. The reason I wanted to chat with you is because you've built some software that solves a problem that you were facing. And it leans right into the productivity space, especially when we're talking about things like PKM, which is a real hot button topic and it essentially, as we are entering a kind of this new renaissance era of productivity, it's kind of replaced this, the iconoclastic like GTD, getting things done method. People are leaning more towards the PKM stuff. And I think it's safe to say it went from like getting things done, Covey planner kind of stuff, to bullet journal stuff, to now PKM, where it kind of ties all those things together. So first off, tell me about what you've built, and then tell me why you built it.
Yeah, so what I built is basically a learning tool. So it's an app that helps you accelerate your learning, and it does that in a couple of ways, which we can talk about later. But the main three ways are like note taking, mind mapping, and flashcards. And the reason that I built it is because I was facing this problem of learning myself, and it's just that a lot of people in the workplace or in their personal lives, they have to cope with continually increasing information, basically lifelong learning, just to keep up. And the problem that I faced in my personal life is my wife is Chinese, and whenever I would travel to China with her to talk with her friends, with my in-laws who don't really speak English, like I would really struggle to speak with them, because I was trying to learn Chinese, but I couldn't, because it's obviously very hard, as a lot of topics nowadays are really hard to learn. And that's when I basically took back and stepped back and looked at my learning process, and I discovered like, well, it's not all that good. Like the stuff that we learn in school, it doesn't work. And I dove a bit into like learning science to find out methods that do actually work. And that's when I put something together that worked for me to learn Chinese. And eventually, over time, as I wanted to make that process smoother for myself, I turned that into an app which I personally use and which other people can use as well, not just to learn languages, but also to learn other stuff like medicine, but even stuff like marketing, or skills you might need in a workplace.
And that's really the core of it, is like when we talk about personal knowledge management, it isn't just about storage. It's about learning. It's about the ability to revisit. So tell me about the Traverse study system, because again, going back to what I started to discuss, the idea of getting things done was a productivity framework. And people are like, wow, this thing's amazing. And it is. But there are elements of getting things done that existed before getting things done. There are elements of bullet journaling that existed before journaling to a degree. But there's always kind of, it's almost like that idea of Bruce Lee and his Jeet Kune Do, where he brought in like absorb what's useful, discard what isn't, add your own. You've kind of done this with the Traverse study system. So can you touch on it? Maybe what you found, maybe not for yourself so much, because when you build something for yourself, you're solving your own problem, but others that have started to follow that path have said, this is what I need because it does this for me.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely like that. Like when you first start out, there's so much things you can do to learn better, but we basically broken it down into four basic steps and built the app around that. And the first step is, and this is something we talked about in our earlier conversation,
yep.
but basically called meta learning, where you sit back and you basically have a look at what you that you read and start connecting them together, almost drawing it up in a visual way. And that is one of the first points as well, where the mind mapping function of the app comes in. So this is like the meta learning step. And then the next step, and this is where it's quite interesting, because this is what people often get wrong, because a lot of people have heard about something called the forgetting curve. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you don't know, it basically is an exponentially decaying curve that says when you first learn something, your recall is like 100%, but after one day it's like 50%, and after like 2 days it's like 25%, and so on. And basically, if you repeat or try to actively recall that information, like at optimally spaced intervals, so say like after 1 day, after 5 days, whatever, you basically reset that forgetting curve, and your recall will be back to 100%. So this is something a lot of people know and practice nowadays, using like flashcards, and that is actually step 3. But step 2 is more interesting for me personally, mm-hmm. because it is about the initial decay of the forgetting curve. So we can actually make the forgetting curve decay slower in the first place, so that basically, once we've done that, we need to repeat a lot fewer times later on. And the key to this is something called encoding. So we have short-term memory. Short-term memory can hold around 7 items. And then we have long-term memory, which is like virtually unlimited, because it stores things in like a visual kind of way.
Right.
And the goal is basically to get that information from short-term memory when you're first reading it into long-term memory. Mm-hmm. And encoding is basically is that process of transferring it from short-term memory into long-term memory. And we can massively improve how much is retained in long-term memory by improving our encoding. And improving encoding basically means thinking about what you're learning, like putting in efforts, basically putting in like increasing cognitive load. Almost, it's called like cognitive load theory, like the theory behind it.
Right.
And it means that instead of just reading something and maybe writing it down, you actually sit back and ask questions about it, like how does this relate to other ideas? Like how does this relate to my personal life? What is my personal opinion about this? How can I apply this principle in real life? And as when we start asking those kind of questions, that we get a much clearer picture of what it actually is that we are learning, and it's that's visual picture that can easily be saved into a long-term memory, and this is much more easily retained than if we just had rote knowledge, like just a list of words, basically.
So before we jump into the third one, why do you think that curve isn't something that people focus on flattening as much or erasing? Because is it just because we've never been taught to do it that way, or is it just really it's a habitual thing that's challenging, or a combination of those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, yeah, it is because we're not really taught to do this in school. I mean, in school, to some degree, it's also not even necessary, because we study for an exam, we forget everything and study for the next exam, right? So it's not necessary.
Yeah, you're studying to get the grade. You're not studying to learn per se, right? Like in a lot of ways.
Exactly. Like you're not studying to retain for the long term or for life. So that is one thing. Like we don't actually learn about it. But then the other thing is like actually like resetting this deforgetting curve periodically by reviewing material or by like flashcard practice, as I talked about. It's a relatively easy to understand, and it's a recipe that can be easily followed and can be quite easily turned into something like an app. Like there's lots of flashcard apps out there which do that very well. But the process of actually flattening that curve initially, which is the process of encoding, where you have to ask all those questions and start mapping things out and seeing how they work together. That's not like an easy to follow recipe. So it's much harder. So it's not an easy sell. That's why people don't talk about it a lot.
It also isn't the thing that it's not quantitative. It's hard to measure, right?
Yeah.
So people don't. It's funny because I've talked about this before with people when it comes to productivity. The idea of like, well, or even writing. I think there's that story of the writer that works from home, and his wife would come home every day from work after working all day, and he'd be staring at the window. And she did this like week over week. This would happen, and she finally got so frustrated. She said, "Well, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm writing." And that as a writer, I get that. I mean, you're not going to stare at the window all the time, but writing isn't just the sitting in front of the keyboard and writing. There's elements to it. There's thinking, there's processing, there's ruminating on things. And that's how it's how we learn long-term retention, like you're talking about. It's how we make sense of it's sense making, it's understanding. And there's no immediate payoff for that, right? Like, so that's why I don't think it's not valued at, out of the gate. It's valued when you've done it. People go, wow, that's amazing. But if you spend time doing it or give focus to that, it's like, wait, what are you doing? Why are you doing, like, get back to work or you should be studying. It's like, well, wait, hold on. Like, I'm going for a walk while I think about these things, or I've got this journal in front of me and I'm journaling it out. I'm doing it, right? And as we move into the third phase, the flashcards, it's interesting because flashcards, that's early childhood stuff, right? Like that's the stuff that, and we come back to it. Why is that such an integral part?
Yeah, I think that's a good question as well. So first of all, I love that you said like in the last part, like it's almost like you go wow when you're mapping things out and like making those connections, right? Because it's like those wow moments. That is when learning happens. That are those flashes of insights, and that's what we should aim for, and that's what makes the whole learning process fun as well.
Right.
And what like stirs up our curiosity. And then, as you said, in the third phase, that's when we move into retention. So we have it placed initially in our long-term memory at this point, and it's in a format that makes it easily retainable, so that it doesn't like immediately disappear again. And now the next challenge is to retain that information over the long term and make it accessible when you need it. And yeah, that's where techniques like active recall, which basically means like testing yourself on information, and spaced repetition, which is like spacing out when you recall that information over time at increasing intervals, as I said, like after 1 day, after 5 days, after like 30 days. So you don't have to spend time with it every day. Like actually the time you need to spend on retaining something becomes less as you've known it for longer.
Right.
Yeah.
To a degree. I agree with you, unless you're trying to go for mastery, right? In which case you want to try to do it on a more, it's like habits, right? Like if you do them every day, you're going to get better and better and better and better and better at them. Meditation be an example, journaling, like you won't, like it'll just feel weird when you don't do it. If it's something I believe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, if it's something that I believe is like I read about time and productivity every single day, or to the point where now, and I think this has to go back to my storytelling days when I was doing comedy and writing, is I always look for, because I study this for a living, I'm always looking for the elements of time or productivity in everyday things, like things that you wouldn't normally correlate. Like I've written pieces where I talk about pro wrestling and time management, and people are like, how did you make that connection? I'm like, well, I'm interested in pro wrestling. I'm interested, and you connect those dots, right? And I think that I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is yes, the cadence is the if it's retention for, I believe, things that are maybe not inherently necessary for you to have instantly on your fingertips, to the point where you want to become a master of it. Like the idea of, I want to be known as an expert, or I want to, that cadence, you may not want to expose yourself to it less frequently. Does that work in the same way with the kind of stuff we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think to a degree we're saying the same thing. So the cadence that basically where the intervals become larger over time, that is for a single piece of knowledge or information that you want to retain. But as you said, we want to go to mastery. So we're constantly making those new connections and adding knowledge, subtracting things that we don't need, and that is basically what fills up that time and what we need to do almost periodically, as I said, and make it a habit. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you're a master, you will spend less time on a single piece of knowledge that you've learned ages ago, but you will spend exactly the same amount of time on like the broader scope of whatever it is you're learning. So if it's like copywriting or
you'll go back to it. You'll go back to the basics because I mean, you have a new sense of wealth and understanding that you may go back to and go, oh, there's something more to this that I missed. There's the fourth piece that we need to talk about still. But before we get there, how important is it to have a trusted place or a trusted system so that your brain can focus on the retention, on the practice? I was reading about, what's his name? George Leitenberg. He wrote, he had what they called waste books, right? The idea of, which is essentially, it could be considered a commonplace book, right? The idea of writing things down, capturing things basically relentlessly. Unfortunately, in the book I was reading called Soon, which is a book about procrastination, great, fantastic read. It turns out that he was more of an aphorist than actually accomplished. So he wrote about a lot more things than he actually did. But the fact that he was constantly capturing meant that he was exploring and going, and it was almost second nature. So how important is it to have that ability to have a second nature tool or even a trusted system that you can go to so that your brain can do the work it's meant to do?
Yeah, I think that there are, I think, almost two lines of thoughts there. So first, when you can capture something easily and write it down, it almost feels like it's safe, and it frees up your mind to think about new things, right? So that is something that such tools can do for you. But on the other hand, that tends to get really messy over time, and you won't be able to find stuff, and it just gets way too much to the point where you don't find any connections anymore.
Yep.
And then the other line of thought is that when you don't write things down, but just keep them in your head, they kind of stay in your brain, like annoying you a bit, right? It's like I have to remember this, but I haven't written it down yet. But that is actually forces your brain to think more about it and like make actual connections, and it kind of stays like in like the subconscious part of your brain. And then when you do actually write it down, you will have a much more developed thought, and you will be able to judge much better whether it's actually worth keeping or whether it's just one of those, like 99% of ideas that you don't want to keep. Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's where I think I used to be like a relentless capture person. I still do. I still believe in like the capture everything, regret nothing kind of idea, to a point. I mean, if I'm going for, actually a friend of mine, Mike Schmitz, we were talking about this not too long ago. I was going for a walk and I saw this wonderful, I was walking down this wonderful pathway with trees surrounding, and I wanted to take a picture of it because I was going to journal about it later. And I didn't, because I'm like, you know what? This is not so critical that I'm not, when I think about the end of my day, I'll be able to quickly recall, oh man, that walk, I really want to, I don't have a picture of it, but I can see it in my mind. I'll write about it, and that will create whatever picture, if I want to look at this a year down the road, 3 months, whatever it is. I think the tricky part, and maybe you can address this, especially as somebody who's, captured a lot of stuff myself, is to get them out of my head. It doesn't mean it's out of my head at all. It means that I don't have to think about it anymore actively. You're right. Subconsciously, there's still some thoughts. As a matter of fact, I think sometimes what's happened, and this is why he calls them waste books or commonplace books, and I have these little notebooks. I almost call them satellite notebooks. Like, they're not where things stay. They're where they go, and then I will move them to the final destination, wherever that is. If it's a bigger notebook or Obsidian or any of these other tools, Napkin, there's tons of them out there. I'm not. That's the other thing. There's so many, it's tricky, right? So we'll talk a bit more about Traverse in a minute. Because again, each of them does something very particularly well and has a different mission or a different problem to solve. But what I find often is the interesting thing is if I capture something down and then I noticed I've already captured it before. Right. So that's my brain's way of saying, hey, this is something that's important to you. Whether it's something you need to do, whether there's an idea you need to bring to the forefront, whether it's something you want to explore, you've captured this once, twice, 3 times before. You need to make sure that you bring this to your attention. So I wonder if it's... I find it challenging for me, and I'll reflect it back to you, to not write something down when it comes to my head because I don't trust that I will be able to bring it back because I've got so much in my life going on that I'm concerned I'll lose it. I'd rather do like the whole like author writing the first draft, getting it out of my head, and then going back and editing it and going, oh, well, that's garbage. That idea is dumb. Or, oh, that task, I don't need to do that. It's almost like it's a fail safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is a potent filter for signal versus noise as well. Like once you come across an idea or something, for me, it's usually like 2 times. Then I will start taking it seriously.
You get better.
I don't think anything seriously that I've only heard about once.
If it shows up 3 times, I'm not just thinking about the idea. I'm like, is there a break in my system somewhere? Like, what did I do wrong? Right? You know, that's that. Then that detracts me from the thing. But yeah, like if I see it a couple times and like you're saying, then it's like, oh, wait, this is a signal.
Yeah, exactly. And all of the other things is noise. And I think it's probably just personal preference, whether you want to capture that like potential noise as well. As long as you make sure that you have a place which you call like a capture inbox or whatever, where things are like noise until it's clear that they are actually becoming a signal.
I think that's the key, right? It's like you have to know, people like systems until they have them. Or they like the idea of systems. And then when they have to, it's like I can tell you right now, I'm going through this phase of, it's not a phase. Wow, I can't believe I said that because that's automatically putting it into the context of it's not going to last very long. I've gotten better at budgeting. I'm using a program called You Need a Budget. Jesse Meekham's been on the show before. We'll link to that in the show notes because it's a really good conversation. But the idea is budgeting, right? I've not been very good with money for pretty much all my life. So I've gotten better over the last several months at it. There have been days where my brain's gone, oh, this is fine. I don't need to do this. I don't need to do this. So like I've been working on this budgeting aspect and part of me is like, I can let it go. But as soon as I let it go, the whole thing will start to fall apart because I'm not very good at it still. B, I don't enjoy doing it, but I know it's necessary. Mm-hmm. So I like the idea of a system or a practice or a framework. I liked that idea. I still like the fact that I have it. What I don't like is always practicing it. I don't like, and whenever that friction shows up, that's when I've gotten better at going, well, wait a minute. That's a signal that's telling me it's working and you need to not pay attention to don't write it down. Don't worry about it because it's been hard. And now you're hitting this breaking point of where your willpower, your psyche or whatever is going, this is now where Mike's vulnerable, where I can say, hey, don't worry about it right now. It's like the don't break the chain thing, right? Where if you break the chain for one day, unless you know that that's the day you break the chain on a cheat day would be an example of breaking the chain, right? But then the cheat day in and of itself is a chain because you're doing a cheat day every Friday, right? So I think that there are several things I think you need to be habitual with. Learning has to be one, doesn't it? Like if you have a system that you can trust and a tool that you can trust, and we'll talk about Traverse here as we get close to wrapping up here in a bit. But if you have that, I think that just opens the door up to like again, for lack of a better term, that Bradley Cooper movie Limitless, where you're like, you know what? I can throw anything in here, get recall on anything in here, and I will willingly trust it, and I will bear the fruit. I will benefit from that.
Yeah, and I think when you say in here, it's important to remember what we're actually throwing things into, because obviously you're first putting it into a tool, and the tool will make sure that the tool then will make sure that it's transferred like back into your brain and stays there. And that is like the whole point, that and especially when we talk about a tool for learning, that it is transferred back into your brain and stays there for you to access it when you need it. So the point is not that the stuff is in the tool. That's just to make us feel safe, right?
Right.
The point is that it's actually in your brain where it's there when you need it. Because when you're in, I don't know, in an important meeting where you need this piece of information about marketing, like you're not gonna search for minutes into your system. You need it right there. And I think that's a point that a lot of the like note-taking or tools out there overlook. And
right.
Like you can have a great system there, but it becomes messy and stuff becomes hard to find, to the point where it's not as useful. And like actual real insights rarely come from one of those tools, because you have like Roam Research, where obviously everything is backlinked and you can see what you link to it. But I've used it myself in the past, but it's rare that you actually get an insight from those links. Like those insights come when you're having a shower, when you're having a walk.
Right.
So yeah, the things need to be inside your head for you to be able to have those insights.
And that's like I was saying, that's where the tool comes in. That's where Traverse is different, because you're not going to sit there and open up your Obsidian vault and go, hold on, let me look at this. Like you might do that in a very particular moment in time, but when you're going for a walk, you're more often than not, you're either having the ideas or you're learning something and you want to create out of it. You want to, like you say on the Traverse.link page, which we'll link to obviously in the show notes, writing equals thinking, right? So you're writing it out and you're thinking, like that's happening at the same time. The key to your point is if you don't have that tool in front of you, you don't want to be lost. Like, cause then your brain goes, see, this doesn't work. Like, cause it needs to trust it. But ultimately, when you have that system, and that's why I wanted to talk about the system up front, not so much the tool. Like you said, you've got the tool, which is helpful, but the system is what you rely on, because you can take the system and move it from place to place to place to place to place because tools come and go. But if you have that thing you trust, then, and in essence, it's supporting the main thing that you're going to need for the recall, which is, between your two ears, right? Like your mind, your brain. So on that note, what does Traverse do if someone's looking at it and they're like, okay, Mike, Dominic, you've mentioned Roam Research. There's a plethora of them out there. It's becoming almost like the same deluge of apps that we saw with to-do list apps about a decade ago, maybe not even quite a decade ago. You've got, I can rhyme them all off, but we would be done the show. That's how long it would take. So when you built Traverse, what was like this? I need this for me. I can't be the only one, much like Ryder Carroll with the bullet journal. These other tools aren't doing this for me. This is why I made this.
Yeah, exactly. So I needed Traverse specifically for learning something real hard. And
the language, right? That language.
That language, and then obviously when I actually started building it, there were so many other things that I had to learn that were really hard as well, like coding, marketing, all of those things, right? So like this learning problem, that was not really solved by any of the apps out there. Like the flashcard apps did a small part of it. The note-taking apps did a small part of it. The mind mapping apps did a small part of it, but it was all scattered over the place, and it's like impossible to manage. So basically, I built Traverse to have an app where you have all the tools that you need specifically for learning, and have them in a way that make sure that what you need to learn is in your brain rather than just in a tool.
So as we get close to wrapping up, you asked me to share some stuff with you before we jumped on the call. And obviously we've had a good conversation here where maybe more stuff's going to show up there. So when I shared that with you, I'd love for people to be able to see kind of what, like, either see what that looks like, and how they can learn. Because what was interesting is we talked about the things that I talk about, time, productivity, expectation management, intentional living, all that stuff. So what would that look like? Does it, is there some way that we can show, hey, I want to see what this looks like? Is there some way we can show the listener what that looks like, or is it better to describe it, or what's the best way to proceed with this?
Yeah, so we're going to put something together which will show it in a visual way that the listener can then clone so that they can use it themselves. And that is really the point, because we're going to put something together in a way that, well, makes sense for me, or maybe for other people who are going to help put that together. And it's gonna look really nice, like, oh, this piece of productivity connects to this philosophy and things about habits and whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be notes about it, and obviously reminders that allow you to build that retention of those principles over time. But the key is that people can actually take that and create their own copy. And that's when they can do this encoding. They can say, hey, for me, actually, in my personal life, this makes more sense to connect it to this, or like, I don't see it this way. And they can go in and change all of that stuff, or they can even just use it as an inspiration and create their own copy of how it looks for them. And that is the powerful thing, because that is what really does the encoding, like tying that to how it works for you personally, because learning is highly personal.
Right. And this is why I want to make this a bonus episode for people, so people can go, okay, you know what? I like this idea. I want to be able to create connective thoughts. I want to be able to, we live in a world that, we lifelong learners want to be able to, there's no shortage of things to learn. We are exposed to so much stuff.
Yeah.
And if we can find a way to tap into that and leverage it and retain it and then use it, I'm all for that. So, Dominic, this has been great. Where can people keep up with you? We'll obviously put this link in the show notes for what people want to share and stuff like that, to make it like for the people to be able to grab it. So that's going to be super cool. But the other things I want to add is where people can learn more about you, get more information about Traverse, and whatever else you might want to share before we wrap up.
Yeah. So the best way is probably just sign up for Traverse, and you will be on my email list. You'll get a bunch of introductory emails which describe a lot of the things that we talk about, but you also get like my weekly email newsletter. Then there's a couple of other places on Twitter. I haven't been active lately, but I'm going to be active again soon at Dominic Zijlstra. So yeah, that's probably the best place apart from that. And LinkedIn, you can find me as well, LinkedIn /Dominic Zijlstra.
Well, I'm looking forward to tapping into Traverse a little bit deeper as well. Thanks so much, Dominic, for having a productive conversation with me today.
Yeah, and I think we will put what we just talked about together, basically the best tools about productivity, put that together in a mind map and make it available at Traverse.link /Mike Vardy.
That works perfectly. Think? I think that's great. Yeah. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for taking the time. We like you said off the top of the call, we started this conversation. We had a tool that we were using that didn't quite cut the mustard, so we switched back to the basics, and we got back to the basics for this one. And I think that what we've talked about here helps you get back to the basics of how you can retain, how you can learn, and Traverse. Look, I'm looking forward to exploring it more. And yeah, thanks for that special link. And again, thanks for having a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks to Dominic for joining me today on the program. Again, a nice little bonus episode. So all you need to do to get the show notes for this episode, it's a bit of a different one when we do bonus episodes. So all you need to do is go to productivityist.com/podcast bonus Traverse. So podcast bonus Traverse, it's linked, the app you're using right now. So all you have to do is click on that link and you're good to go. By the way, when you're in that app, subscribe to the podcast. That way you don't miss a single episode of what's to come, including bonus episodes that we throw here every once in a while. This would be an example of that. Plus, you can go back and listen to the archives far faster, far simpler, because you'll be subscribed to the podcast. And when you hit those show notes and you go to that URL I sent you, you should also pay a visit to the sponsors page. That way you can support the show by checking out the sponsors that we talked about today. So just go to productivityist.com/podcast sponsors to make that happen. I'm glad I was able to make this bonus episode happen for you. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.